Not all Israel are Israel. This is the famous paraphrased quote from Romans chapter 9, verse 6. But what does this mean? Are Gentile believers in Jesus now a part of Israel? The actual quote from Romans 9:6 is a bit more complex. Many major translations render it as, not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. In addition to being paraphrased, this passage is often removed from its wider context and used to teach that the church is now the true Israel. But is that what Paul's teaching? Let's take a deeper look. The word Israel is used 73 times in the New Testament. There are no instances where the word Israel refers to Gentile believers in Jesus. Not once is Israel ever synonymous with the church. Rather, Israel refers to either the specific land or the specific people who are Jewish. In Romans 9:6, Paul is actually narrowing the definition of a true Jew or a true Israelite. He's not expanding it to include Gentiles. To understand this better, let's use a modern-day sports illustration. Let's say you're a big fan of the Chicago Bulls. You call yourself an authentic fan, a true fan. So we start talking. After some conversation, I ask you, who's on the starting lineup for the Bulls this year? You're able to name 1 or 2 players, but not all 5. Then I ask if you've attended any Bulls games this season. You've not. At this point, I ask the question, are you sure you're a true fan? You see, a true fan of the Chicago Bulls attends at least a few Bulls games every season. A true fan would at least know the starting lineup. Now, let's bring it back to the text of Scripture. What Paul is saying in the overall context here is that a true Israelite is one who places their faith in the Jewish Messiah, the one promised by the Jewish prophets. A true Israelite is part of the remnant of Israel. Paul teaches on that in Romans chapter 11, verse 5. To see Paul's statement here as a sudden expansion of who's considered to be an Israelite does not make any sense with the rest of Paul's teachings, especially in Romans 9 through 11. Commenting on this passage, the Moody Bible Commentary points out the following. The true Jewish people are Jews who are not mere descendants of Abraham, but are rather his ethnic descendants who were chosen by God to be recipients of his covenant blessings, including salvation. In verse 6, Paul does not have Gentile believers in view. Paul is concerned to demonstrate that what God was doing with Israel in Paul's day was what God had always done with the descendants of Abraham. Gentile Christians are simply not in view. Paul's point is to indicate that true Israel consists of the ethnic descendants of Abraham, yes, but specifically those who have embraced the Messiah, who are the faithful remnant, who are a narrower subset of a broader ethnic Israel. Based on the immediate context of Romans chapter 9, as well as the wider context of the whole book of Romans, it just simply would not make sense for Paul to use an expansionist definition of true Israel to mean Gentile believers in Jesus. In John chapter 1, starting in verse 47, we read about an interesting encounter, specifically the calling of Philip and Nathanael. In John chapter 1, verse 47, it says this, Then Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said, Here is a true Israelite. No deceit is in him. Nathanael then asked, How do you know me? Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you, Jesus answered. Nathan then replies, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. This passage in John chapter 1 provides us with a wonderful illustration of how to use the phrase true Israelite. Jesus is clearly not telling Nathanael that he's now a Gentile. Jesus is clearly not trying to expand the definition of an Israelite. Jesus is not all of a sudden telling Gentile believers that they're now Israel. What Jesus is telling Nathanael is that he's got it right. What Jesus is telling Nathanael is that he's recognized the most important thing that he could ever recognize. And that is that Jesus of Nazareth is God's promised Messiah. He's the Son of God, and he came to save the world from their sins. So, in Romans chapter 9, verse 6, Paul uses the phrase the same way that Jesus did. Paul is not saying that Gentile believers are now Israel or a spiritual Israel or a true Israel. He's expressing what is clearly said throughout the Hebrew Bible and the New Covenant Scriptures. God's purpose for the Jewish people, Israel, is to follow him. Those Jewish people who do believe in Jesus the Messiah are considered the remnant, the true Israel. May God give all of us a burden to share the gospel with the Jewish people and prayerfully see the numbers of true Israel expand. Until next time, shalom.